Hello everyone, my name is Austin Blackman. I'm the Chief of Environment, Energy, and Open Space for Mayor Walsh, which means that I'm responsible for Parks and Recreation, Inspectional Services, as well as the Environment Department. So if you've had a chance to meet with Commissioners Cook, Commissioners Christopher, Commissioner Spector, those are three of my direct reports. Happy to answer any questions about Inspectional Services, Parks and Rec, but really here tonight to talk mostly about Climate Ready Boston. I know that there was an article in the North End Waterfront paper, and folks may have some questions around that. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of the report and then leave some time open for questions and answers if the police and president. So Climate Ready Boston, many of you probably haven't even heard of it, but this is an over year-long initiative from the Environment Department and Mayor Walsh to really understand and study what we need to do right now to ensure that Boston can continue to thrive, be a healthy and innovative city, regardless of what may happen to our climate. And that means what investments do we need to make, what changes in policies do we need to make, whether it's zoning or otherwise. So, high level, what we learned is that by the end of the century, over $80 billion worth of assets in the city of Boston will be at risk. About 20% of the city will be in the FEMA floodplain, and that's about 12,000 buildings. So some of you may say, and rightfully so, how does this affect my life? Why does this matter? Well, we also learned that we're going to have up to 90 days of weather that's going to be over 90 degrees Fahrenheit. To put that in perspective, we had about 11 at the beginning of the century. Already we had about 20 last year. What does that mean? That means it's going to shoot up your electricity bills because we're going to need to use more AC. It means that it's going to be more difficult for our elderly people to spend time outside. It's less time that they can spend with kids. Some folks probably rely on grandma and grandpa quite a bit to take care of kids, particularly over the summer. That's going to become more difficult. Heat-related mortalities, people who have heart disease, lung disease, and really struggle with being outside. Heat-related mortalities are expected to increase by threefold, 3x by the end of the century. So those are some of the impacts, but then also there's the flooding impacts. If you haven't had a chance to see the report, there are definitely portions of this neighborhood that are going to be impacted. As soon as 2030, basically the entire area from Lewis Wharf down to the aquarium is already going to be in the FEMA flood. By the end of the century, we're going to start seeing even the average daily high tide get as far as Faneuil Hall. So these are going to be real impacts that are going to start affecting us right away. That's not even to say around some of the severe weather that we might have. So all this was done in context around Mayor Walsh's Imagine Boston 2030, our citywide plan. How do we understand and put together what we need to do around zoning, what we need to do around protecting these neighborhoods, and layer that along with how we choose to grow our city, how we're going to put the additional people who want to move here, and how we're going to continue to make sure that our city can grow and thrive and be a healthy place that we all love. So that's a very, very brief overview. Some of the things that we're definitely going to be doing as next steps are going to be looking at our zoning code. How do we improve that to make sure that our zoning reflects that we want to protect our buildings and our neighborhoods. We're also going to be looking at local resilience initiatives, so whether that's adding more open space or seawalls to make sure that our neighborhoods are protected. That's another thing that we're going to be looking at. We were hoping to work with the federal government around a study to look at what a harbor-wide barrier would look like under a Trump administration. That may or may not happen, but we're hopeful that we're still going to be able to do that. If you have any questions on any of this, please do feel free to reach out to myself. I've got cards that I can leave behind. Also, our Director of Communications, Lauren Zingarelli, who also happens to be a North End resident, is here with us as well, and she can certainly point you in the direction for anything that you may need also. So, if the Police President, happy to take questions and answers.
We typically just ask the council if they have anything, and we'll open it up to the audience. So, that being said, does anyone have a question for Climate Ready? Well, I will say not a question, but obviously a lot of these, like you mentioned, are important to the North End, especially those Wharf that's kind of the news a lot. So, valuable.
I have a question.
Sure.
If we're worried about the tides and other things like that, why is the city vigorously trying to develop in the zone that will be covered with water? No.
So you're talking about Lewis Wharf there?
Bruce Wharf and the master plan there along there, that's obviously in the zone that's gonna get flooded. So why are we spending billions and billions of dollars?
So I won't talk about any specific
No.
project.
Just the idea of building there.
But I think that it's important to recognize that a lot of the areas where the city is projected to grow are areas that are post-industrial zones. And so you've got a handful of those here in the north end, but they're more in East Boston, they're more in Charlestown, up by the Sullivan Square area, where you've got low density, where if you make some transportation improvements, you can have a lot more people be there, and then not have the impacts of additional density that you would then receive here in the north end, where you, as you said, you've already got a lot of people here, they're already on top of each other. So we want to make sure that we push people as much as we can to those areas that can accept more density so that we don't have those impacts for the rest of the city of Boston. Those post-industrial areas also happen to be in flood zones. So if we then we have to choose between the two. And if we can take a strategy so that we know that we can protect those areas, that's what we're committing
I
to.
guess that's what I'm actually asking, how you take some sort of strategy before you build those things.
So that's the entire point of Climate Ready Boston, to understand where those flood pathways are so that we can develop solutions to protect those areas, to make them as, to minimize those vulnerabilities, to make sure that people are going to be protected and they're going to be reasonable places to live and service. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're never going to flood, right? That's not what resiliency is about. It's about protecting as much as you can, but then also having plans in place so that you can get things back to normal as quickly as possible.
Austin, have you, I know you mentioned you work with the Trump administration on seawall, but have you guys done any specs on where the expansion of the seawall, the height of it, how far out, any ballpark?
I'm hoping that we'll be able to do that. We had plans to work with the Army Corps of Engineers under the Obama administration, and we were hoping that the next administration would take on those issues as much as the Clinton administration would have. We will see with the Trump administration. Obviously, the Trump administration has said different things about climate and whether they would want us to put resources behind flood protections that are associated with climate is yet to be seen. We're hopeful that they will.
But the city itself hasn't done any spec work.
The city itself, it has not done any specific designs. That's what we were hoping to do. Others have done projections, whether that is doing a wall that connects kind of the tip of Logan over down to the bottom of the seaport area, or whether it's going farther out, so connecting Deer Island maybe over to Long Island and then back up across over to Quincy, or maybe even farther out and connecting Deer Island out to Lovell's Island out to Hull and World's End out that way. So those are kind of the three that are usually talked about. You can see those sketched out in the Climate Ready Boston report. To put that in perspective, those preliminary studies were done by a firm about 10 years ago, and they estimated the cost to be anywhere from 10 to $12 billion. Obviously, the city of Boston's budget is about $2.9 billion, so something on an annual basis. So if we were to do something like that, it would require help from the state and federal governments to make that happen.
Is MBTA preparedness part of your scope? Like, in a situation like Hurricane Sandy, obviously the train system in New York was really impacted by it. Is that something you guys think about when you do your work? Or?
Just in case everybody didn't hear the question, is MBTA preparedness part of our work? The short answer is that we work very closely with the MBTA, particularly through the Climate Ready Boston effort. We made sure that they were part of a group that came in to advise us and make sure that they were aware of the data so that our plans would all talk together. In terms of the actual implementation of those emergency plans, they execute those on their own. But we wanted to make sure that all of our data was talking to each other, that we were all working together towards the same initiative. So not just MBTA, but Mass DOT, right? So we've got several flood entrances into the tunnel systems, even in the 2030 timeframe. So we leveraged a lot of their data and made sure that they were aware of that. MBTA is involved, Boston Water and Sewer, Massachusetts Water Resources Authority, make sure that we're not having any backflow through any of the outfalls that then creates new flood pathways up in through neighborhoods that way as well. So long story short, it's not just MBTA, it's all the infrastructure in the city of Boston that we made sure that we coordinated on.
Any other questions from anyone in the audience? All right, well, thank you for coming tonight. I really
My
appreciate it.
pleasure.
Thank you.